You know how some battles just become these epic legends? We're told there were these do-or-die moments that basically saved the world. While the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains in 451 AD, it's one of the biggest of them all. But here's the thing, what if the story we've all been told is actually a myth? Let's dig in and find out.
Okay, so the story you usually hear, it's like a Hollywood blockbuster. You've got Attila the Hun, right? The Scourge of God. He's leading this massive army. They call it a barbarian horde, but really it was this complex mix of a ton of different peoples. And he's marching right into the heart of Roman Gaul. But wait, he's met by this grand alliance, a real good guys team-up of Romans and their Germanic allies, led by the brilliant general Aetius and the Visigoth king Theodoric. The stage is set for this titanic struggle for the very soul of Europe.
And look, this isn't a new idea. This is the classic take on it, summed up perfectly by the 19th century historian Edward Shepherd Creasy. The idea was that this was the moment Christian Europe made its stand against, the so-called pagan invaders. It was the battle that supposedly saved all of classical heritage from being totally wiped out. For all intents and purposes, this was it. The battle that saved civilization.
But is that what really happened? Or is it just a really, really good story? Because, when you actually start digging into the historical sources, the whole picture gets a lot murkier. That nice, clean idea of a world-saving victory, it really starts to fall apart.
All right, so let's hit rewind. Let's go back to the year 451. What on earth brought these two enormous armies to a field in what's now France? Well, it definitely wasn't some simple good versus evil showdown. Oh no, it was this tangled mess of politics, raw ambition, and get this, some truly bizarre royal drama. See, Attila basically had a shopping list of excuses to go to war. You had a Vandal king down in North Africa trying to stir up trouble with the Visigoths. You had a couple of Frankish princes fighting over who got to be king. But the real spark, the juiciest reason? The Roman emperor's own sister, a woman named Honoria. She sent Attila her ring, trying to get out of an arranged marriage she hated. And Attila, he just ran with it. He claimed it was a marriage proposal and demanded half the Western Roman Empire as her dowry. This wasn't just about conquest anymore. For him, it was personal. And wow, what an invasion it was. I mean, just look at the lineups here. This was not a simple Romans versus Huns fight, not at all. It was more like a battle of nations. Aetius's coalition was this fragile, cobbled-together team of Romans, Visigoths, Franks, Alans, a whole bunch of groups. And Attila's army was just as diverse, a total melting pot of peoples he had conquered. We're talking about a true world war for its time. So when these two massive, multi-ethnic armies finally smash into each other, the result wasn't some neat, orderly battle with clear lines. Nope, it was just pure, unadulterated chaos. The accounts we have from back then are super confusing, they often contradict each other, but they all paint a picture of this desperate, bloody free-for-all on some long ridge. And if you want a perfect example of this chaos, look no further than the death of King Theodoric of the Visigoths. He was a crucial leader for the Roman side, and in the middle of the fight he dies, and his own men don't even realize it. He's just gone. Was he trampled by his own charging cavalry, or was he killed by a spear from an enemy Goth who was fighting for Attila? We don't know for sure because the accounts are all over the place, but his death just goes to show you how brutal and utterly confusing this fight really was.
But then, at one point, the tide turns. Dramatically, Attila himself is forced back into his own fortified camp. And according to the historian Jordanes, things got so bad that Attila thought it was over. He literally built a funeral pyre out of horse saddles, and he was ready to throw himself into the flames rather than be captured. Think about that. The supposedly invincible Attila the Hun was on the absolute brink of total annihilation.
Now, let's talk about the sheer scale of the slaughter, because the numbers we hear are just immense. One historian from the time, a guy named Hadashes, gives a truly staggering number for the dead.
He claimed 300,000 men fell in the battle. 300,000! But that's not the only number we have, and this is where the whole story starts to get even more complicated. Because another historian, Jordanes, writing about a century later, reports a totally different, though still gigantic, number.
He puts the death toll at 165,000. Now look, both of these numbers are almost certainly huge exaggerations. But the point is, the difference between them is massive. It just shows you that even the most basic facts of this battle are up for debate. And if we can't even agree on the casualty count, what else about this story might be wrong? And that brings us to one of the biggest mysteries of the whole battle. Okay, so picture this. Attila is trapped, His army is battered, the Roman coalition has him right where they want him. It's checkmate. But then, the Roman general, Aetius, does something incredibly strange. He basically tells his allies, "All right, good job everyone, you can go home now." And he just lets Attila and his army escape. Why? Why would you let your greatest enemy just walk away? It's a question that has baffled historians for centuries.
In letting Attila go, well, that had immediate consequences. I mean, if this battle had really broken the power of the Huns for good, the story should have ended right there. But it didn't. Not even close. Get this, just 1 year later, 1 year after his supposedly decisive defeat, Attila was back. And this time, he wasn't messing around in Gaul. He marched his army straight into the heart of the empire, Italy. He sacked major cities, one after another, and set his sights on Rome itself. Yeah, so much for that battle being the end of the Hunnic threat, right? So, where was our hero, General Aetius? Well, he didn't have that big multinational army he'd had in Gaul. His political power back home in Italy was pretty shaky. Basically, he couldn't stop the Huns with military force. So the emperor had to try something else, a different kind of power. He sent a group to negotiate with Attila, and leading it was a very unexpected choice, the Bishop of Rome himself, Pope Leo I.
Now, the legend here is amazing. The story goes that Pope Leo, through the power of God, just single-handedly convinced Attila to turn back. Later versions of the story even have saints appearing in the sky with flaming swords. But the reality? It was, a lot more complicated. Yes, the Pope's persuasion was part of it, but there was also plague and famine sweeping through Attila's army. He was also probably spooked by the fate of Alaric, another guy who sacked Rome and then died right after. And, this is a big one, a fresh army from the Eastern Roman Empire was on its way to Italy. So Attila did turn back, but it was almost certainly a strategic decision, not a miracle. So, where does all this leave our so-called world-saving battle? Well, when you actually look at all the evidence, that grand, simple story, it just kind of dissolves, doesn't it? Let's put the two main views side by side and really break it down.
And this really gets to the heart of the historical debate. On the one hand, you have the traditional view. This was a massive triumph for Christian Europe, it saved classical culture, and it broke the myth of Hunnish invincibility for good. But on the other hand, you have many modern historians like J.B. Barrie who argue that its significance has been, and I quote, enormously exaggerated. They say the real turning point was actually the successful defense of the city of Orleans, which happened before this big battle. That's what forced Attila to retreat in the first place. So this battle, they argue, wasn't the decisive blow. It didn't even stop him from invading Italy the very next year. So what was it? A critical, world-saving victory, or just a really bloody and kind of indecisive clash that happened while one side was already retreating?
Ultimately, the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains might just be the perfect example of how a messy, confusing, ambiguous historical event can get polished over the centuries into a powerful, simple myth. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Which is more powerful in the end? The actual battle that happened, or the story we choose to tell about it?